The badge felt heavier in her pocket than it should have, considering it was just metal and plastic, and 2 years of grief wrapped in faded leather. Keisha Williams touched it through the worn fabric of her denim jacket as she walked through the marble hallways of Riverside Preparatory Academy, each step echoing in the pre-dawn silence like a countdown to something she couldn't yet name. It was Tuesday morning, 6:37 a.m., and she was already calculating trajectories. Her father had taught her that. Agent Marcus Williams, FBI Cybercrime Division, dead at 43 from a stress-induced heart attack that everyone politely called natural causes. He'd been investigating public corruption cases that kept him awake for months, chasing digital breadcrumbs through networks owned by people who could make problems disappear with a phone call. Always know your environment. Baby girl. His voice echoed in her memory as she swiped her student ID at the computer lab door. Physical and digital. Know where the cameras are, where the blind spots hide, where the power flows. And let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel, whether you're here for the action, the heart, or both. Thank you for being part of this mission. The computer lab smelled like industrial cleaner and the faint ozone of electronics humming in standby mode. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Portland's morning fog clung to the perfectly manicured grounds like smoke from an expensive cigarette. $40,000 a year bought a lot of perfection at Riverside Prep. Keisha was here on what they called a grief scholarship, a bureaucratic way of saying her dead father's service to his country had earned her a golden ticket into a world that would spend the next 4 years reminding her she didn't belong. She settled at her usual terminal in the back corner, fingers moving across the keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who'd been learning computer systems since she was 12 years old. The screen came alive with command prompts and network diagnostics, displaying a digital map that would make most IT professionals dizzy with its complexity. Keisha wasn't hacking anything. She was just looking. Always looking. Always learning. Always preparing for the moment when looking wouldn't be enough. The network topology of Riverside Prep sprawled across her monitor like a nervous system. Firewalls, access points, administrative backdoors, security cameras, all connected by invisible threads of data and power. Behind her father's badge, secured with electrical tape against the leather, was a micro SD card containing everything he'd taught her about digital forensics, network infiltration, and the art of staying invisible while seeing everything. Her phone buzzed softly against the wooden desk. A text from an unknown number, the kind that would auto-delete in 30 seconds. Tuesday delivery confirmed. Package varies. New problem needs permanent solution. KW cleanup approved. KW Keisha Williams. She screenshotted the message before the deletion protocol could engage. Her phone ran custom firmware that captured everything before it disappeared into digital oblivion. Her father's final gift, along with the paranoia that had kept him alive for 20 years in federal law enforcement. The classroom door opened with a soft, hydraulic hiss. Keisha's fingers stilled on the keyboard, muscle memory engaging the privacy screen faster than conscious thought. To anyone entering, it would look like she was working on calculus homework. Miss Williams, Mrs. Patricia Hayes stood in the doorway, coffee mug steaming in her weathered hands, gray hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. 37 years at Riverside Prep had taught her how to read the subtleties of teenage distress with surgical precision. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. You're here early again." Not a question. Mrs. Hayes had been finding Keisha in various corners of the school before sunrise for 3 weeks now, ever since the incidents started escalating. I like the quiet. Mrs. Hayes stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with deliberate care. The quiet, or the fact that certain students aren't here yet. The words hung in the recycled air between them. Keisha kept her hands perfectly still on the keyboard, watching Mrs. Hayes' reflection in the darkened window as the older woman studied her with the intensity of someone who'd spent nearly 4 decades cataloging the ways privilege could destroy the innocent. I don't know what you mean. Honey, Mrs. Hayes moved closer, setting her coffee mug on the desk beside Keisha's laptop. I've been teaching here since before Tyler Brooks learned to tie his shoes. I knew his father when Robert Brooks was just another entitled rich boy who thought the world owed him a Senate seat. The revelation hit like cold water. Mrs. Hayes wasn't just making conversation. Why are you telling me this? Because I also knew your father. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Keisha's breath caught in her throat. And for a moment, the careful mask she'd worn for months slipped completely. You knew my dad. Mrs. Hayes nodded, settling into the chair beside her with the deliberate movements of someone who'd made this decision after considerable thought. Agent Marcus Williams. He came here 5 years ago, investigating irregularities in our technology contracts. Someone was embezzling through fake equipment purchases, $250,000 over 2 years. Keisha's mind raced through fragments of memory. Her father working late, stress lines deepening around his eyes, muttering about corruption that went all the way to the State House. She'd been 13 then, more interested in learning Python programming than understanding the weight her father carried. He caught them, Mrs. Hayes continued. 3 board members and the former IT director. Your father was thorough, professional, and one of the most genuinely decent men I've encountered in this business. But why are you telling me this now? Mrs. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the fog-shrouded campus where privilege and power moved like tectonic plates beneath a surface of academic excellence. Because I see how they look at you, how they talk. And I remember what your father said the day he finished his investigation here. What did he say? He said, Mrs. Hayes, institutions like this survive by protecting the wrong people from the consequences of their actions. But every system has vulnerabilities, and every vulnerability can be exploited by someone smart enough to see the patterns. She turned to look directly at Keisha. He also said he hoped his daughter would never have to use what he was teaching her. The first bell rang then, sharp and insistent in the morning quiet. Students would be arriving soon, expensive cars pulling into reserved parking spaces, designer backpacks slung over shoulders that had never carried anything heavier than the weight of expectation. Keisha began packing her laptop with movements that appeared casual but were actually choreographed for speed and efficiency. Mrs. Hayes, if someone was doing something illegal here, hypothetically, who would you trust to do something about it? Mrs. Hayes stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Hypothetically, I'd trust someone who understood that doing the right thing and surviving the consequences aren't always compatible choices. She paused at the door, looking back one final time. Your father would be proud of who you've become, Keisha, but he'd also want you to be very, very careful. Then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of coffee and the weight of words that changed everything. Keisha finished packing in silence, but her mind was already racing through implications and possibilities. As she shouldered her backpack, her phone buzzed again with another auto-deleting message. Package delivery 12:30. Bathroom corridor. KW final solution implemented today. She captured the screenshot. Then did something her father had taught her when she was 14. She activated the dead man's switch he'd built into her phone's security system. If she didn't check in every 6 hours. Everything. Network logs, surveillance footage, encrypted communications would automatically upload to a secure server and send alerts to predetermined contacts. The hallways were filling now with the particular kind of controlled chaos that happened when you mixed teenagers with unlimited funds and limited supervision. Keisha moved through it like a ghost, invisible by choice and design, but her enhanced awareness cataloged everything which students walked together, which teachers paid attention, where the security cameras had blind spots. Near her locker, she saw them waiting. Tyler Brooks stood with his back against the wall, arms crossed, wearing the kind of casual confidence that came from never doubting your place in the world. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless charisma that had probably gotten him out of trouble since kindergarten. His father was State Senator Robert Brooks, a man whose political ambitions were exceeded only by his ability to make inconvenient problems disappear. The rest of the Kings flanked him in their usual formation: Mason Hartley, whose pharmaceutical fortune funded half the school's athletic programs; Jake Morrison, the principal's nephew and starting quarterback; David Chen, whose parents owned 3 successful tech companies; Alex Rivera, whose family's real estate empire included half of downtown Portland; and Corey Walsh, whose grandfather had been governor and whose trust fund was the stuff of Riverside legend. They weren't just waiting. They were positioned. Keisha approached her locker with measured steps, each one calculated to appear normal, unhurried. But her pulse was quickening, adrenaline sharpening her senses the way her father had taught her it should when predators were stalking. Well, Tyler's voice carried just far enough to attract attention from nearby students, but not so far as to draw adult supervision. Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Keisha worked her combination lock without looking at him. The familiar sequence of numbers, her father's badge number, backward, clicked open with mechanical precision. "Good morning, Tyler." "Good morning," Mason laughed, a sound like expensive crystal breaking. "Is that what we're calling it, when scholarship cases ignore direct questions?" "I wasn't aware you'd asked me a question." Tyler pushed off from the wall, moving into her personal space with the practiced ease of someone who'd been using physical intimidation since middle school. Close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, something chemical and bitter that made her father's training kick into high alert. "The question, ghetto girl, is what you think you've been doing with our school's security system." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Around them, other students had slowed their movements, pretending to check phones or adjust bags while obviously listening. This was how power worked at Riverside. Nothing was ever direct. Everything was plausibly deniable, and the audience was always carefully managed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Tyler's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "No." "Then maybe you can explain why someone with your IP address has been accessing surveillance footage from the parking lot, late at night, for the past 3 weeks. Keisha's blood went cold, but her expression remained neutral. Network logs. Someone with administrative access had been tracking her digital footprints. That sounds like a question for IT support. "Actually," Tyler said, pulling out his phone, "it sounds like a question for someone who's been spying on me and my friends. Someone who thinks she's smarter than she actually is." The phone's screen lit up, displaying timestamp data that made Keisha's heart race. Her access logs. Her search queries, her digital fingerprints, all laid out like evidence in a court case she didn't know she was on trial for. "Interesting reading," Tyler continued, his voice still conversational, still plausibly innocent to any faculty member who might overhear. "Especially the part where you accessed footage of private conversations. That could be considered stalking, harassment, even." The bell rang then, sharp and insistent. First period. Students began moving toward their classrooms with the resigned efficiency of people accustomed to rigid schedules. But Tyler didn't move. Neither did his crew. "We're going to be late," Keisha said. "You know what I think." Tyler's voice had dropped to something more intimate, more threatening. "I think someone's been playing games they don't understand. I think someone needs to learn that actions have consequences." Before Keisha could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Brooks, Miss Williams." The bell rang. They turned to see Mrs. Hayes approaching with her coffee mug and the kind of authoritative presence that had been intimidating teenagers since the Reagan administration. "Just having a friendly conversation, Mrs. Hayes," Tyler said, his public smile sliding back into place like a well-rehearsed mask. "I'm sure you were, but conversation time is over. Class time has begun." She stepped forward, positioning herself between Tyler and Keisha with casual precision. "Miss Williams, you're in my first period AP Government class this semester. Correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Excellent. We're discussing constitutional protections today. Fourth Amendment should be particularly relevant for young people who understand the importance of privacy rights." Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward Tyler's phone. "Mr. Brooks, I believe you have advanced economics with Mr. Peterson. Wouldn't want you to be tardy on such an important day." Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his smile never wavered. "Of course. See you around, Keisha." The way he said her name sounded like a promise and a threat wrapped in silk. As Tyler and his crew dispersed, Mrs. Hayes fell into step beside Keisha as they walked toward the government classroom. "Everything all right?" "Fine." "Keisha." Mrs. Hayes stopped walking, forcing her to stop as well. The hallway was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers hurrying toward their destinations. "I meant what I said earlier, about being careful." "I know." "Do you?" Mrs. Hayes studied her face with the intensity of someone reading a particularly complex piece of literature. "Because, from where I stand, it looks like you might be in the middle of something that could get very complicated very quickly." Keisha looked at the older woman, really looked at her. 37 years at Riverside Prep. She'd seen countless students come and go, watched patterns repeat themselves across decades of privilege and power. She'd known Keisha's father, had worked with him, had seen firsthand what happened when good people tried to fight corruption from the inside. "Mrs. Hayes," Keisha said quietly, "hypothetically speaking, if someone discovered evidence of illegal activities by students with powerful family connections, and if reporting through normal channels might not work because of political influence, what would you suggest?" Mrs. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, staring down the empty hallway toward the administrative offices where decisions were made behind closed doors and problems were solved with checkbooks rather than consequences. "Hypothetically," she said finally, "I'd suggest that someone be absolutely certain about their evidence before making any moves. And I'd suggest they have multiple backup plans." Hypothetically, Mrs. Hayes smiled. But it was the kind of smile that held secrets. "I'd also suggest that someone remember they're not fighting this battle alone." As they entered the AP government classroom, Keisha felt something shift in the air around her. The weight of her father's badge seemed lighter somehow, as if it had transformed from a burden into a tool. Mrs. Hayes began the day's lesson on Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, but Keisha's mind was already racing ahead, processing implications and calculating odds. Tyler Brooks thought he was hunting her, but as Keisha Williams sat in that government classroom, learning about constitutional rights and the legal frameworks that protected citizens from abuse of power, she realized something her father's training had prepared her for, but she'd never fully understood until now. Sometimes the prey was actually the predator. And sometimes the real trap was letting your enemy think they were winning until the moment they discovered how badly they'd miscalculated. The question wasn't whether Tyler Brooks and his crew of entitled criminals were planning to destroy her. The question was whether they understood that she'd been 3 steps ahead of them since the day her father died. Because somewhere, in the marble hallways of Riverside Preparatory Academy, a war was about to begin. And Keisha Williams had inherited more than just her father's badge and his training. She'd inherited his understanding that justice wasn't something you waited for. It was something you built. One careful move at a time. Until the moment came to spring the trap you'd been setting all along. That moment was coming. Very soon. The rest of the morning passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of normalcy and preparation. Keisha sat through AP Chemistry, watching Tyler Brooks 2 rows ahead of her, noting how he checked his phone every few minutes with the nervous energy of someone coordinating something complex. During advanced calculus, she observed Mason Hartley excuse himself to the bathroom twice in 40 minutes, unusual for someone whose bladder control had never been a concern before. They were moving pieces into position in British literature, while Mrs. Anderson droned about the symbolism in Macbeth. Keisha activated her phone's most sophisticated surveillance app, one her father had helped her code when she was 15, designed to monitor network traffic in real time. The data streams flowing through Riverside's servers told a story that would have terrified any competent IT administrator. Someone with high-level access was systematically altering her student records, discipline reports materializing from thin air, academic probation warnings being backdated, a digital paper trail being constructed with surgical precision to support whatever narrative they planned to deploy. At 11:45, during the passing period before lunch, Keisha made the call she'd been avoiding for 2 years. Agent Sarah Kim answered on the second ring. Kim, this is Keisha Williams, Marcus Williams's daughter. The pause stretched long enough for Keisha to hear traffic noise in the background, suggesting Agent Kim was mobile. Keisha, the agent's voice softened with something that might have been relief. I've been hoping you'd call. How are you holding up? Agent Kim, I need help, and I have information about a case Dad was working on before he died. Where are you right now? Riverside Preparatory Academy. Another pause, shorter this time, but weighted with significance. Jesus, Keisha, are you in immediate danger? I think so. There's a drug distribution network here, and they're planning to frame me today, at lunch. What makes you think that? Because I've been doing what Dad taught me, watching, learning, gathering evidence. Keisha could hear the sound of a car door slamming, an engine starting. Agent Kim was already moving. What kind of evidence? Security footage of drug transactions, network logs showing administrative cover-ups, financial records linking student dealers to outside suppliers, text messages outlining their plan to use me as a scapegoat. Keisha, listen to me very carefully. Get somewhere safe and stay there. I'm 20 minutes out. It's too late for that. Whatever they're planning happens at lunch. If I run now, they'll just pick another target. Another day. This is not your fight. Yes, it is. Keisha's voice carried a steel that surprised even her. Dad died investigating corruption. I won't let his work be for nothing. She hung up before Agent Kim could argue further. The cafeteria at Riverside Prep was a cathedral of adolescent hierarchy, with circular tables arranged in patterns that reflected invisible but rigid social structures. Athletes commanded the prime real estate near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Theater kids clustered by the small stage used for morning announcements. Student government types occupied the center, where they could observe and be observed with equal facility. The scholarship students, all 6 of them, usually huddled together at a corner table near the emergency exit, as if proximity to escape routes could shield them from the particular cruelties of institutional classism. Today, Keisha sat alone. She'd chosen a table with clear sight lines to all entrances, positioned so she could monitor Tyler's crew while maintaining the appearance of casual lunch consumption. Her meal, a peanut butter sandwich from home, and an apple that had seen better days, remained untouched as she watched the digital chessboard play out on her phone screen. The network activity was intensifying. Administrative access was being used to plant additional flags in her record-suspected substance abuse. Association with known dealers. Declining academic performance. They were building a comprehensive profile that would make her arrest seem not just plausible, but inevitable. At 12:28, Tyler Brooks stood up. The movement was casual, unhurried, but Keisha caught the subtle exchange of glances that passed between the kings. Mason nodded toward the bathroom corridor. Jake pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. David Chen looked directly at Keisha and smiled the kind of smile that belonged in a documentary about predators. They were moving. Keisha rose as well, leaving her untouched lunch as evidence of her presence. The walk toward the bathroom corridor felt like crossing a minefield. Each step calculated to appear normal, while her enhanced awareness catalogued every detail, the positioning of faculty supervisors, the flow of student traffic, the location of security cameras. The corridor leading to the bathrooms was quieter, lined with trophy cases celebrating decades of academic and athletic excellence. Motivational posters proclaimed the virtues of school spirit and personal achievement, the perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. Keisha had made it halfway down the corridor when she heard them approaching. Keisha, Tyler's voice carried just the right note of concerned authority. Hey, we need to talk to you about something important. She turned. Tyler was approaching with Mason and Jake flanking him, their expressions carefully crafted to suggest helpful intervention rather than hostile confrontation. Someone reported seeing you near the parking lot yesterday after school, Tyler continued, his tone pitched to sound responsible. Adult. Near the cars where there was an incident. I walked through the parking lot to catch the bus. Right, of course. But here's the thing. Tyler stepped closer, and Keisha caught that chemical smell again. Stronger now. Someone's car was broken into yesterday. And with your background, people are starting to ask questions. The accusation floated in the recycled air like poison gas. Background. Everyone within earshot understood the coded language scholarship student. Different zip code, different world, different moral standards. I didn't break into anyone's car. I'm sure you didn't, Tyler said, his reasonableness so practiced it felt rehearsed. But you understand how it looks, right? And with all the other incidents lately, missing items, security concerns, Maybe it would be better if we just checked your bag. Clear the air. My bag. Just a quick look, for everyone's peace of mind." It was masterful manipulation. In less than a minute, Tyler had established reasonable suspicion, positioned himself as a reluctant mediator, and created a scenario where refusing to comply would seem suspicious to any authority figure who might investigate later. "I don't think that's necessary." Tyler's helpful expression flickered slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "Come on, Keisha. Don't make this more complicated than it has to be." "I said no." Mason stepped forward, phone already in hand. "Actually, I think we should get Principal Morrison down here. Let him handle this officially." Perfect trap. Refuse cooperation and appear guilty. Agree to search and face whatever they'd planted. The classic double bind. But as Tyler reached for her backpack, his fingers brushing against the strap, something unexpected happened. "Okay, this is seriously messed up." The voice came from above them, tinny and electronic. Everyone looked up to see a small drone hovering near the ceiling tiles no bigger than a dinner plate. Its camera array focused directly on their group. "What the hell is that?" Jake spun in circles, trying to locate the source of the voice. "Danny Rodriguez," the voice replied through the drone's speaker system. "And I've been testing my electronics project up here for like 20 minutes. This is way better than anything I was expecting to record." Tyler's face went pale. "Get that thing down from there." "I don't think so." The drone rotated slightly, its camera focusing on Tyler's jacket pocket. "See? I was just trying to test the range and audio quality of my DIY surveillance system for the science fair. But then you guys started this whole thing about searching bags and being suspicious. And now I'm really curious about what's in your pocket." Danny Rodriguez. Keisha knew him by reputation. Sophomore, autistic, electronics genius, essentially invisible to bullies who dismissed him as too weird to bother with. The kind of kid who could build sophisticated technology from spare parts and remain completely unnoticed while doing it. "You little freak," Tyler started forward, but the corridor was too narrow, the drone too high. The really interesting part, Danny's voice continued through the speaker, "is that I've been testing this thing around school for weeks, and I've got some pretty fascinating footage of what happens in the parking lot on Tuesdays. You know, around the same time you and your friends have those super important car conversations." Tyler froze completely. "You've been spying on us." "I've been testing a drone," Danny corrected. "But if you want to call accidentally recording drug deals spying, that's your choice." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Around them, the few students in the corridor had stopped pretending to mind their own business. "Danny," Tyler said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "you need to delete whatever you recorded and get out of here before something bad happens to you." "Actually," Danny replied, "I need to tell you something really important. See, I've been live streaming all my test footage to a cloud server for backup purposes, and about 15 minutes ago, I sent copies of some really interesting recordings to a few people who might find them educational." As if summoned by his words, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from both ends of the corridor. Adult voices, sharp with authority. But Tyler wasn't listening anymore, with the desperate efficiency of someone whose entire future was collapsing. He grabbed Keisha's arm. "You're coming with me," he hissed, his helpful mask completely abandoned now. Right now, his grip was stronger than she'd expected, fingers digging into her bicep as he began dragging her toward the bathroom door. This was it, the moment they'd been building toward, the private space where they could plant evidence without witnesses. Except they did have a witness, Whoa! 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 Danny's voice crackled through the drone's speaker as the device descended for a better angle. This is definitely not okay. Tyler was pulling harder now, Keisha's feet sliding on the polished floor as she tried to resist without escalating into a full struggle. Through the bathroom door, she could see the space they'd prepared, probably with planted evidence already positioned, with excuses already rehearsed. "Let go of me," she said, loud enough for Danny's audio to capture clearly. "You're going to cooperate," Tyler snarled, his composure completely shattered now. "You're going to shut up and let us fix this problem." That's when the cavalry arrived. "FBI, nobody move." Agent Sarah Kim appeared at the far end of the corridor, badge held high, followed by 3 other agents in tactical gear. From the opposite direction, Principal Morrison came hurrying toward them, his face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. But Tyler was beyond rational thought now. With Keisha's arm still in his grip, he reached into his jacket pocket with his free hand, pulling out a small plastic bag filled with white powder. "This was in her backpack," he announced desperately to anyone who would listen. "We were just trying to help her." "Actually," Danny's voice interrupted from the drone now hovering at eye level, "I've been recording this whole thing in 4K, so we've got Tyler grabbing Keisha, dragging her toward the bathroom, and then pulling drugs out of his own pocket while claiming they came from her bag." Agent Kim was moving fast now, her weapon drawn but pointed down. "Tyler Brooks, release Miss Williams immediately and step away from her." "This is insane," Tyler protested, but his grip on Keisha's arm loosened. "You can't just—" "We can and we are." Agent Kim nodded to the other agents, who moved with practiced efficiency. "Tyler Brooks, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, assault, conspiracy, and attempted evidence tampering." As Tyler was being read his rights, Mason and Jake found themselves similarly surrounded. The bag of cocaine was photographed in Tyler's hand, catalogued as evidence while he sputtered protests that sounded increasingly desperate. "Wait," Principal Morrison interjected, looking like a man watching his comfortable world collapse in real time. "Surely there's been some mistake." "No mistake, Principal Morrison," Agent Kim replied coldly. "Though we'll need to discuss some serious irregularities in your school's reporting procedures, and the matter of administrative access being granted to students involved in criminal activities." Danny's drone settled gently on the floor as its creator approached from the main corridor, a slight sophomore with an expression of intense satisfaction. "Pretty cool, right?" he said to Keisha. "I've been working on this for months. Silent rotors, 4K cameras, encrypted data transmission. I was going to enter it in the state science fair, but this seemed like a better field test." "Danny," Keisha said, still processing what had just happened, "how long were you up there?" "About 20 minutes. I was testing flight patterns when you guys started your whole confrontation thing. Lucky timing, I guess." Agent Kim approached Keisha, her expression mixing professional focus with personal concern. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but Agent Kim, how did you get here so fast?" "I was already in the neighborhood," Agent Kim replied. "Mrs. Hayes called me yesterday." Keisha turned to see Mrs. Hayes emerging from the crowd of students and faculty that had gathered to witness the arrests. The older teacher looked remarkably composed for someone watching her workplace transform into a crime scene. "Mrs. Hayes, your father and I stayed in touch after his investigation here," Mrs. Hayes explained. "When I saw the patterns starting to repeat the same families, the same behaviors, the same institutional protection, I reached out to Agent Kim. We've been monitoring the situation for weeks." "You've been watching me. We've been protecting you," Agent Kim corrected. Your father's investigation into public corruption never ended, Keisha. It just went underground after he died. The Brooks family has been on our radar for years. As Tyler was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Keisha one final time. The helpful mask was completely gone now, replaced by raw fury and the dawning realization of consequences. "This isn't over," he said. "Actually," Agent Kim replied, "it is." 3 weeks later, the story had exploded beyond Riverside Prep into something much larger. The Tyler Brooks case had uncovered a network involving over 40 students across multiple private schools, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in monthly revenue. 8 adults had been arrested, including a school security guard, 2 board members, and a state senator's chief of staff. Tyler himself was facing federal trafficking charges. His father, State Senator Robert Brooks, had announced he would not seek re-election and was cooperating with federal investigators. Keisha sat in Agent Kim's office at the FBI Portland field office, not as a victim or witness, but as the first recipient of the Marcus Williams Youth Cybersecurity Fellowship, a program created to channel exceptional technical skills toward public service. "How does it feel?" Agent Kim asked, gesturing toward the news articles spread across her desk. "Different than I expected," Keisha replied honestly. "I thought I'd feel more satisfied. Justice is complicated that way. It's not the same as revenge. That's what my father would have said." Agent Kim nodded. Marcus always understood that the real victory wasn't destroying the bad guys. It was building systems that could prevent the next generation of bad guys from succeeding. "Danny and I are working on something. We're calling it the Digital Guardian Project, student-run surveillance to prevent bullying and illegal activities. Mrs. Hayes is our faculty sponsor." "That sounds exactly like something your father would support," Keisha smiled, touching the badge in her pocket, not her father's old one anymore, but a temporary junior analyst credential that represented a future she was building rather than a past she was carrying. "Agent Kim, there's something I need to know." "What's that?" "My father's investigation into public corruption, the one that was giving him so much stress before he died. Was it worth it?" Agent Kim was quiet for a long moment, studying the young woman who had inherited her father's courage along with his technical skills. "Your father's work provided the foundation for everything we've accomplished in the past month. The corruption network he identified has been completely dismantled. 3 state officials have been indicted, and his digital forensics methodology is now being taught at Quantico. So he didn't die for nothing. Marcus Williams died fighting for justice, Keisha, and his daughter just proved that his legacy is in very good hands." 6 months later, Keisha stood in the computer lab at Riverside Preparatory Academy, the same room where this had all begun, but transformed now by changes that her father would have been proud of. Danny was there too, working on the next iteration of his drone technology, which was now being tested in 12 schools across Oregon as part of the Hayes-Williams Protocol for Student Protection. Mrs. Hayes entered with her coffee mug and a smile that had grown noticeably brighter since the arrests. "How are our digital guardians doing today?" "Good," Keisha replied. "The new surveillance system goes fully online next week. Anonymous reporting, direct law enforcement channels, student oversight committee, and Danny's drones, keeping everyone honest," Danny said without looking up from his circuit board. "It's amazing how much better people behave when they know someone might be watching." Keisha looked out the window at the campus, where she'd almost been destroyed, now transformed into a place where kids like her might actually be safe. The Digital Guardian project had received federal funding. The Hayes-Williams Protocol was being implemented in schools nationwide. And her father's badge, the real one now, issued by the FBI, rested in her pocket, alongside acceptance letters from Stanford, MIT, and Carnegie Mellon. She was exactly where she belonged, and she was just getting started. That evening, as Keisha walked through the now familiar hallways, one final time before graduation, she paused at the memorial plaque that had been installed near the computer lab, the Marcus Williams Digital Ethics Center, dedicated to the pursuit of justice through technology. Below it, a smaller plaque read, "Every system has vulnerabilities. Every vulnerability can be exploited by someone smart enough to see the patterns. But true strength lies in using that knowledge to protect rather than destroy." Her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Kim, congressional hearing on student cybersecurity next month. They want to hear from the architect of the Hayes-Williams Protocol. Keisha smiled, thinking about all the quiet kids in all the schools where her father's work would continue through the systems she and Danny had built. Justice wasn't just about catching the bad guys. It was about making sure there were fewer victims to catch them hurting. The legacy lived on, stronger than ever.